training splits. I know you talked about yours and kind of where you're at now. In the past, you've done max OT. I'm sure you've tapped into some of the, you got the upper, lower, you got full body. Maybe you can talk about this for those listening, your experience with some of those things and what maybe some of them all had to offer, and where you're at now in terms of thinking about splits versus maybe how you're thinking about training now relative to muscle growth.
Yeah. Well, I think as far as me and my training career, right? I think we pretty much all start out with body part splits. I think that's generally how a lot of us I shouldn't say that because that's different now. When I say that, when I started, like in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, it was very, very typical to do a body part split. That was kind of what everybody did, right? And then I kind of graduated from just doing your general body part split to a little bit more heavy lifting. And I remember it was kind of like that first beginner newbie gain phase where I think I just pulled out some article from some muscle and fitness magazine back then. Yes, we had these magazines that we would get delivered to our homes every month or so that, look like a comic book for you folks that don't know what magazines are. But I just pulled it out of there and I ran that for a good, I want to say 8 months. And it was just doing things like, wow, I have never squatted more than 150 pounds before. And I was just kind of doing low repetitions, and I was doing like 185. And I remember that was the very first time that I worked up to 225, and I was doing things that I could not do a lot of reps with, and that's kind of how the body responds to weight training to begin with. It's like, crap, that's heavy. We've got to get stronger, And I really got pretty darn strong, and the side effect of that, my muscles were really popping, And then not long after that is when I learned about maximum overload training. You mentioned that earlier, max OT. And I just basically, it was still a body part split, but I had now a progression plan to where when you got 3 sets of 6, it's just basically the good old fashioned double progression as we know it today, right? I didn't know that back then, but when you get 3 sets of 6, you go up in weight, and right. You kind of struggle with that weight for a while. When you got 3 sets of 6, you go up in weight again. And that was the bulk of my beginner lifting career, was from like 1998 until about 2000 and probably 5, right? I just ran max OT, all the time in a body part split. Then for probably, about the time that I met Jeff in 2006 and Alberto in 2008, Alberto and Eric in 2008. Then I started doing the what's now known as the DUP, right? The daily undulating periodization. And that was introduced to me in the form of FAT. I think Lane Norton made that popular, power hypertrophy adaptive training. So now I'm starting to do things twice a week, right? It's kind of like I got 2 lower days and I've got 3 upper days, and I'm starting to periodize things a little bit, with one day being lighter weight and higher repetitions, and another upper day being lower weight, I should say higher weight and lower repetitions. And I probably ran that from about 2007-ish, 2008 until about 2010, and in 2010 I started getting into powerlifting. My wife did her first powerlifting meet in 2009, and that gave me the bug, and I got the 531 bug, the 531 Wendler, right? And I did that for probably a good 2 or 3 years, kind of on and off, and when motivation would kind of wane a little bit, I would kind of drift back to power hypertrophy adaptive training. But I ran that for a while. And then of course, about 2012, 13, 14, the muscle and strength training and nutrition pyramids came out, right?
Right.
And that was really when I started understanding why max OT worked, why power hypertrophy adaptive training worked, and I started getting that twice a week frequency, right? Because Eric made it so easy to understand all of the different variables and how they might fit into a person's lifting career. when I was doing a max OT and doing the body part splits, well, of course it worked. I was basically a beginner, very early novice. And so all I needed was to have a progression plan. And then, of course, exhausted that because I'm a boring person. Now I start doing things twice a week, and it's kind of like it was starting to make sense. And then I started writing my own programs, and started getting creative and kind of incorporating different programs and taking
More custom.
exactly, customizing and taking things from one program and combining them with the other, right?
Nice.
So that's kind of how I learned, through trial and error, and then of course understanding the variables and how they kind of fit. And that kind of brings me to where I have been, like, probably the last 6-7 years in writing programs and customizing things, because that's really fun. That is really fun. And I've done things like I'll write a program that sounds really, really good to me, and I'll run it myself, and there's been times, I'll admit, where I'll run something for 3 months, 4 months, something like that, arguably like call it maybe 3 blocks of training, 4 blocks of training. And I'm like, that is junk. That tore me up. Because that's the way we basically write. It's like, okay, I want to do this. And then we find out, crap, I can't do all that.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of us do that,
Yes. Looks good on paper. Looks great on paper.
Yeah. And then you run it for a good 3-4 months. And I'm just like, man, that's crap. I'm never using that on anybody,
Right.
And then of course we have the luxury that we do listen to people and like, I want to do this and I want to combine this and I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, let's check off as many of the boxes as possible that we have in the training pyramids and put something together. And then I'll get feedback from them down the road 3-4 months, and they really like it, and it's like, oh, well, maybe that's a keeper, and then other people like, I didn't like it. Well, how come you didn't like it? Well, this and this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's valid, and so I'll kind of like whatever combination of things we put together with that, I'll kind of get away from.
Gotcha.
Until, yeah, like I told you, it was probably maybe the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I kind of came upon this particular system that I'm doing right now that I like I said, I really, really like. And to be honest with you, I think that's the most important part. That base of the muscle and strength training pyramids, right? You've got to adhere to it. Even if it's junk, if you can adhere to it, you're going to be better than running the perfect split and waning and waxing and doing it for 4 months and taking 2 months off, and then doing a month where you're sore, and then two good months, and then now you're getting tired of it and junk volume, or you're just going at it half-heartedly, or whatever. I think that is the downfall of a lot of what could be successful programs. Shoot, I'm lucky if I can see noticeable progression semi-annually, literally. And so I've really had to create programming that I really enjoy, that I really, really like dig doing. I'm eager to get in the gym, and sometimes even giddy, once I get in there.